And we're live. All right. What's up, everybody? Tonight we got a pretty special guest. He's someone who's been on our podcast. This is a second situation he's on our podcast. And a lot of podcasts maybe would not have him because honestly, most hosts maybe wouldn't even know how to interview him. Okay. Or maybe they're intimidated of him. He's very intelligent. He's very smart. He's actually a lawyer. His name is Hassan Shibly. And he's a former director of Cair right here in Florida. He's, which is literally one of the most talked about Muslim organizations here in the United States. Some people see Cair as a civil rights group, and some see it as political. Some see it as misunderstood. And depending on who you ask, you're going to get something completely, unique. But I think this is why this conversation is, pretty important. We're living in a period here in the United States in 2025. And I think that the Muslim and Jewish relationship here in America is more emotional, more polarized, and more fragile than it has maybe ever been since 9/11. So instead of just screaming at each other, not actually getting anything done, I want to sit down as a Middle Eastern Jewish man myself, who basically came up around Muslims and actually ask questions that maybe other people won't ask. Because when we have a former Cair director here sit down with an Iranian Jewish host, we're about to talk about things that maybe usually stay off camera. So Hassan, tonight, I want to understand the world you come from, the work you do, and also the critiques, the controversies, and some of the predictions some people make. So I just want to start off and say, what do you think about, first, welcome.
Thanks, team. I appreciate you having me on. It's always great to connect and, address the issues that's on everyone's mind from different perspectives and have a healthy and respectful dialogue. So I appreciate you for having me on.
Yeah, man. Thank you, man. Let me ask you, man, just to start off here. So from my understanding is that Cair does do, you were former director at Cair.
Right. I was director of Cair, Florida for 10 years almost. Yeah.
Cair. Okay. And my understanding is that you do you're involved, this organization is involved in community service. It helps people.
Yeah. So I came into Cair, Florida, right out of law school. I just graduated law school in 2011 from University of New York at Buffalo and got the job offer to come down and work for Cair in Florida right out of law school. And I remember when I came down, man, it was my first day. I walked in the room and I was, wow, I'm the executive director myself because I was the only full-time staff member. We had a leaky roof. We had about $6,000 in the bank, and I think even more than that in debt. And it was basically my organization to cultivate, to shape, to grow, and I served it for 10 years. By the time I left, we had 25 staff. We had 5 offices. We had 8 lawyers. We did millions in free legal work for the community to really protect the U.S. Constitution for everyone. It was when it comes to Cair in Florida, it was really an organization that I sort of rebuilt from the ground up, and very, very proud of the work that we did. And we built incredible alliances with interfaith leaders, with Christians, Jews, Hindus, atheists, people of all different backgrounds, united on one common thing, which is, listen, I'm a proud father of 4 children. They're going to grow up in this country. And I want my children and the children of all people, your children, everyone's children, to grow up free and proud of their identity without fear of intimidation or harassment. So our work was exclusively about protecting the U.S. Constitution for all people in this land and fighting against hatred and bigotry and injustice. So I'm very proud of the work that we did. I actually first connected with Cair when I was 18, and I was coming back from an Islamic conference in Toronto, Canada, to Buffalo. And when we got to the border, they said, go in for a random inspection. My mom said, what do you mean random? I said, Mom, random means they saw your headscarf. My mom's a professor of orthodontics at the University of Buffalo at the time, but she wears the Muslim headscarf. And I was shocked when I walked into the room. I mean, there were just 40 Muslims. We were held for 6 hours. We were all U.S. citizens. We were fingerprinted, first interrogated, treated like criminals just for attending a faith-based conference. And that's when I realized, like, man, we immigrated from Syria seeking freedom and liberty and justice. That's the greatest thing America has to offer, and that's enshrined in the Constitution. And the best thing we can do is strive to protect the Constitution. So Cair at the time represented us in the litigation, against U.S. Customs and Border Protection for the religious profiling that they engaged in. And ultimately, I got an internship at Cair National in D.C. So I spent my summer over there in D.C. And then about a decade later, accepted the position as Cair Florida's executive director.
Yeah, so it seems like the organization also, they have something called Know Your Rights, I think, workshops.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'll be very open about how I grew Cair Florida from being the only full-time staff member to having 25 staff by the time I left, which we focused on educating the community. So every week I would travel across the state of Florida, and I would do Know Your Rights trainings. What do you do if the FBI show up at your door without a warrant and they want to question you, they want to interrogate you? What do you do if you get picked on at the border when you're traveling because you're Muslim? So we just really did trainings for the community for free of charge. And as we did that, people got very interested in our work and would donate, would support. We're exclusively basically U.S. funded, Florida funded. I mean, I'll tell you, in the 10 years I worked at Cair Florida, bro, I didn't even have health insurance, so it's wild. People make all sorts of wild accusations. Like, I knew the budget, man. When we started, my first year budget was $80,000. By the time I left, it was close to $2 million for the whole year. But bro, $2 million for one of the largest and most active American Muslim civil rights organizations in the country is literally nothing. We had 25 staff, $2 million budget. I mean, we were just stretched to the limit. I mean, bro, as a private attorney, I make more in a month now than I did in a year working for Cair Florida. It was just, it's a home-based civil rights organization here to protect civil rights at home.
Nice, man. By the way, I'm sorry, man. I sent you the link for your.
Yeah, let me give it a retweet real quick.
Yeah, just so it's not just I don't want to ambush you or anything.
Yes, sir. Get some
it's so just so everybody knows, man, Hassan is not just some random Arab I found on the street. He's actually a pretty famous and respected scholar and lawyer. He's helped out quite a bit of people in his community. He just did a podcast with Jake Shields, which is a mutual friend of ours, and he went to Qatar, a very popular country here in the United States, with Dan Bazarian. Is that right?
Yeah, last year we took Dan out to visit Qatar, and people don't know this, but this was a completely self-funded trip that we went out. I wanted him to see more of the Muslim world. He wasn't paid to go there. We paid all out of pocket to go ourselves. It was a nice trip. We spent close to a week there, meeting with different people and enjoying really good Arabic food and some shisha. It was a good time.
I'm curious, man, as someone who's Syrian, and not to get too far off, just a coincidence. This is since we're talking about this, as a Syrian, how do you view, what's going on between Syria and Qatar right now with the new government?
So look, I mean, honestly, as a Syrian, we absolutely celebrate the downfall of Assad. I mean, I was just watching videos yesterday as they celebrated the 1-year liberation of Syria from the Assad regime. And one of the most heart-touching moments was seeing the freedom fighters go into Assad's torture chambers and jails and liberate not just men, but women and children that haven't seen the light of day in years. I mean, Assad has killed over 1 million Syrian civilians. And so to finally see Syria, I visited Syria in January of this year for the first time in 14 years. I was born in Syria. I'm a proud American. I'm an American by choice, but my heritage is from Syria. Damascus is actually the oldest living city in the world that's continuously inhabited. My neighbors in Syria are actually Christian. When I went to Syria in January, we actually went to distribute humanitarian aid to some of the villages. And, Gavi, who's with me, is a Syrian Christian man. Who's very proud of his Christian faith and his heritage. And we've peacefully coexisted for generations. I remember over 14 years ago when I visited Syria, we actually visited cities where the nuns still speak Aramaic, which is the original language of Jesus. So, frankly, you have Christians, you have Jews, you have Muslims in Syria. We've coexisted for a very, very long time. And a lot of us have shared in our resentment of the Assad regime, which was a secular dictatorship that survived by torture and persecution of its own people. They saw the Syrian people as its own slaves. So I will tell you, when I visited Syria it was the first time I ever went to Syria and felt respected as a human being. Felt that the government worked for the people and was for the people, not that we were slaves of the government. It was the first time I actually went to Syria and prayed in a government office building when it was time to pray. Under the Assad regime, you could get disappeared if you prayed in a government building, So just happy for the freedom of the Syrian people and just wishing the best moving forward.
All right. Speaking of Qatar too, man, I want to, pull something up here, man. It's actually pretty interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Kash Patel, our FBI director, here he says, Kash Patel just signed 2 MOUs with Qatar's Minister of Interior to expand bilateral security cooperation in training, intelligence sharing, and capacity building. Patel has previously faced criticism for undisclosed paid consulting work for Qatar's embassy in Washington, work that watchdog groups say should have triggered FARA registration, was only revealed after Trump won the 2024 election and nominated Patel for his position. So here he is with the Ministry of Interior in Qatar, and one more. There he is. How do you view our relationship with Qatar?
Look, I think the relationship with Qatar, given our relationship with Israel, is a necessary balance at this time, because I do believe that Israel has way too much influence over American foreign policy. But I'm a big believer, and I think this is something you and I may agree with, which is I'm a big believer in America first. We really need America to focus on America and Americans. I don't want to see any of our tax dollars leave this country for the benefit of foreign nations. It often happens at the benefit of foreign nations, but at the expense of the American people. So I think we need peace of mind and tranquility that our elected officials are acting in the interest of the American people and for the American people only. And let's take a more isolationist approach at this time. Honestly, I think that is the best direction. So I'm in favor of neutrally applied policies that keep our tax dollars at home and stop any sort of foreign influence. Now, again, I'm not going to support anything where Israel has a lot of influence over America, but then we don't necessarily engage with other nations like Qatar. I think as long as America has the relationship it has with Israel, it's important that it's balanced by other nations like Qatar. But if it were up to me, man, I would just ban foreign engagement across the board. I would keep all of our tax dollars at home, and let's just keep America for Americans and America first at home.
What do you think if someone were to make the argument that, and by the way, I'm for not giving any more aid to any country. I'm okay with that, including Israel, which I'm going in about 2 weeks. And but when I go to Israel, I spend my own money. And when I go vacation, I literally buy my own flight. I buy my own hotel, and I can go there as an American, to go vacation there, right? My family history is in Jerusalem. So, even prior to 1948, so now that said, okay, what if someone were to say the argument to you of, okay, Hassan, you make a good point. However, it's not like giving money to the Palestinians where it loses money for the United States. When they give money to Israel, Israel gives them intelligence against the terrorists, not the innocent Muslims, the terrorists. And they get about a 15x ROI on the money that they gave Israel, which like 85 out of $100 just goes to create more jobs in the United States and buy supplies and products from here. And they help us develop technology. Now, right. You already know this argument. I don't even.
No. Obviously, it's one I would definitely push back against. Look, and I think that's also one of the key distinctions between Israel and Qatar. I think the difference with Israel is we send billions of our tax dollars over there, some of which they use to buy back weapons from us. And these weapons have had an insanely disproportionate kill rate of civilians that has made us a lot of enemies without any real benefit. Whereas with Qatar, they're actually, sending us money. They're investing in the U.S. They're sending billions. But quite interesting is I think that, when it comes to Israel, unfortunately, they're much more involved on the lobbying side. So I remember when Trump invited Miriam Adelson and was speaking before Miriam. And he said, she's got billions of dollars. She walks into the office whenever she wants. And, I asked her, does she love Israel or America first? And she wouldn't answer. So again, I think, Qatar's relationship with America is much more into investment, and it's balancing America's relationship with Israel, if anything. But that still didn't stop Israel from bombing the negotiators in Qatar, which really upset President Trump at the time. But when it comes to America's support, financial support of Israel, I don't believe that there's an ROI. I really believe that we're sending billions of dollars over there. The vast majority of those that are killed by Israel has been civilians. That's by Israel's even own data. There's really no denying it. You can't accidentally kill tens of thousands of civilians. And frankly, we wouldn't have terrorist enemies if it wasn't for our support of Israel. I think the reason, some people in the Middle East don't like America is because they see Palestinian children being killed, paid for by American weapons. So it's sort of like a self-creating problem. And I think if we just pulled out of Israel and pulled out of supporting Israel financially, we'd also not need the intelligence, because people wouldn't hate us for supporting Israel.
Right. So it's interesting you say, this is the fun part of our conversations, it's interesting because it's like we talk like, it's like personally, it's like we get along on so many things, but it's just, it's just, I want to just take that back a step, of America would not have, and I assume that you and I both love America.
Absolutely.
I assume that you and I are both Americans who love America, who put America first, right? And when you say that America would not have this issue if it was not for the state of Israel. So the state of Israel was started in 1948. However, in around 1780s to about 1850, there was the Barbary Pirate Wars. And that was literally North African Muslim states that were attacking American merchant ships. And they actually enslaved American sailors. And believe it or not, they demanded tribute. And Thomas Jefferson, OG, like a framer of the Constitution, he literally fought America's first war against them. And that's actually where there was like a quote that said something like millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. That was actually where it came from.
Right.
So hold on. There's another one. There was a 1801 declaration of war by Tripoli, where the ruler of Tripoli declared war on the United States because America refused to pay the Islamic jizya style tribute. We had our American ship seized. Americans were taken hostage by the Muslims, and the Marines were sent to Libya. And I didn't even get into, by the way, the 1915 New York Harbor sabotage plot. So to say that America would not have had an issue outside of the state of Israel, what do you think? I mean, I just give you.
No. Listen, I still stand by, and I appreciate your response. But ultimately, you also look at what was the first country in the world to recognize. Do you know which was the first country to recognize America's independence?
Which one?
Morocco. A Muslim country. We've also had really, great relationships. But again, these are, geopolitical conflicts. They happen. But I don't believe there'd be the kind of resentment today if it wasn't for America's support of Israel. Look, for the last few years, we've been watching every single day on our phones, children getting blown up to pieces almost daily. There's literally tens of thousands of civilians that have been killed. It's paid for by American weapons. I don't believe that benefits America whatsoever. And like Americans at home, dude, the inflation is sky high. People can't afford to live anymore. I live in a beautiful home. I don't know I could afford to buy it if it was today. You know what I'm saying? I'm lucky I got it back in 2015. I don't know how the average American, I'm blessed to be a lawyer, own my own business, but I definitely could not afford to survive on the salary that I was making when I worked for Cair, when I was an employee as opposed to a business owner. Americans are struggling at home and we're sending so much money abroad. It's just, it doesn't make sense. And then when you talk about the bombing, the ships and what, you really reminded me of the USS Liberty. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the USS Liberty and the attack on the USS Liberty. Israel literally bombed a U.S. Navy ship and continued to kill them. And the president himself at the time called back aircraft support that was going to support the sailors, and the sailors were given a gag order never to speak about it. So again, I don't see Israel benefiting America's interests. I got a lot of problems with Israel as a whole. I don't hide that. I feel like their laws by nature are extremely discriminatory towards the Arab population, both Christian and Muslim. And I think U.S. support of Israel has cost us a lot of money, has made us a lot of enemies, and has led to far too many deaths of innocent children.
Yeah, the thing is, since you say Morocco, it's interesting you say that, because Morocco is actually one of the Muslim countries where Jews lived, man, for like maybe over 2,000 years. I mean, the oldest country, I think, outside of Israel is Iran.
Right.
Family. Jews have about 2,500 years of history in Iran. Mm-hmm. And there have been periods, I don't know if a lot of Americans notice, but that Jews and Muslims actually coexisted peacefully. And I think one of the most glorious periods in history for Jewish people was actually in Iran. But this predates Islam. And actually Moroccan kings.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Moroccan kings, they actually were often protecting Jewish people when Europe didn't. So, if you look at the history of Jews, it's not always been that, Europe is the safe haven for Jews and Middle East is always the bad. That's not actually pretty accurate, considering that Morocco has one of the oldest communities, and they actually, I would say, even honor their Jewish past. I mean, they have Jewish museums, they've restored synagogues, they have Jewish cemeteries, and there's open travel between Israel and Morocco. I think one reason I'm saying this is not only because you said, not only because you say Morocco, but because I think there is actually quite a bit of history between the Jews and the Muslims having peaceful coexistence. And
absolutely. And I really,
no,
go ahead.
No, I know we have this current issue, but even Azerbaijan, a Muslim country, benefits from their relationship with Israel. They have a great relationship with Israel. The UAE has a pretty good relationship with Israel. The Saudis benefit from Israeli technology. And I think that there are examples of Arabs and Israel and Jews that get along even today, Hassan. Like if you go to UAE, which not too far from where you were at Doha when you were in Qatar, you'll see Israelis there, man. You'll see Jewish people there, not just Europeans.
Yeah. So look, I don't see the conflict really being between Jews and Muslims. I do see it being between sort of European immigrant Jews who've come in to Palestine since 1948 and then created an apartheid system whereby Arabs, even darker skinned Jews like yourself, are treated differently, and I think that's the reality. As a Muslim, I'm actually proud of the heritage whereby Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived under peace and coexisted beautifully for really over 1,000 years within the Middle East, right? I mean, when Saladin conquered Jerusalem, he allowed the invading European crusaders to return unharmed, and he also welcomed numerous Jewish tribes to move back in that had been expelled by the crusaders. You will find ancient synagogues and churches throughout the Middle East that have been protected and that are continuously used to this day. So I want to be very clear. I mean, my mentor, my role model, my example is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he said unequivocally, whoever harms a Jew or a Christian living under Muslim rule, I will be the advocate for that Jew or Christian against that Muslim on the day of judgment. There's other narrations that Muslim won't even smell the fragrance of paradise if they betray and harm a Jew or Christian living under the Muslim rule. So again, for me, it's all about equal treatment under the law and honoring all human life equally. I think what we saw in Gaza, had it been like white, blonde, European children that we saw butchered daily, I don't know that the Western world would have had the appetite for it, but I think because the Palestinians have been demonized and sort of misrepresented, that far too many people have justified the killing of those children. I mean, Randy Fine is a great example, bro. We're in Florida, and I don't know if you know him or your relationship with him, but I don't think, from what I know about you, Nima, I don't think you would ever support some of the tweets that he's put out. I mean, he's literally tweeted on his X. He's a sitting member of Congress in Florida, and he's celebrating the killing of Palestinian children. And I think that is, when a person does that, they've lost their own soul and heart and mind. And I just don't understand how anyone can do that. And we've seen far too much of it. So my message is, let us start honoring the life of all children equally. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you're truly a believer in God, then your heart would ache equally, whether it's a Muslim child, a Jewish child, a Christian child, even an atheist child that is harmed. Because if you believe there's one creator, then all of these children belong to God. And you cannot honor the creator if you dishonor his creation. So, I mean, that's my message. That's what I'm about. I want a world where children of all people can grow up free of fear of death and mutilation and harassment. And I do think, unfortunately, America's policies enabled the killing of too much children. And it's because you have people like Randy Fine in Congress. Randy at least says what he thinks openly. And I'm sure there's many that harbor such feelings quietly, and they just celebrate the killing of children. I think it's insane. And if you were to bring me any Muslim that celebrates the killing of any child, I would condemn that Muslim instantly. You know what I'm saying? That's just, you can't be a person of God and celebrate the killing of children.
It's interesting you mentioned, I know that, I've spoken up about what I felt was, like a little bit of, let's just say, racism within my Jewish community. And I know it upsets a lot of my Jewish brothers and sisters when I talk about it. However, I'm a person that wears his heart on his sleeve, and it does bother me. However, I'm not an Israeli citizen. Does it bother me that there's not a Middle Eastern Jewish man as prime minister in its whole history? Yeah, it definitely bothers me. If I lose friends because I say that, then they're not my friend. Like the fact that it's a Middle Eastern country, and it's only about 38.1% Ashkenazi. And I know that one Jewish person now is going to say, I'm a fake Jew. I'm a Saudi Muslim. I'm a Qatari agent. I'm doing a show with a former, Cair, which I said Cair. I didn't even know how to pronounce it before this stream. That's how much I know. He did that on purpose. Yeah, that does bother me. Like it's I know and I understand. I'm not stupid. I'm not a useful idiot of, Nima, you do know the Arabs and the Iranians say that to divide us. No, I'm not stupid. I'm no one's useful idiot. I understand, but I'm also, to take away my anger about that is like, I'm just not gonna. No one's gonna take that. No one's gonna take that away from me, man. Like I can talk about that, So I just want to get that off my chest. So, and it does provoke me. It does provoke me, and I can say yes, it provokes me when an Arab or Iranian says that to me openly. I'll tell you, it does provoke me, but because it provokes me, and because I get triggered, and I talk about it. It does not mean I work for Saudi. It does not mean I work for Qatar. It does not mean I am IRGC. I have a right to get upset that in Israel, my motherland, since 1948, we have not had one Middle Eastern man that looks like me, like a sand nigger, camel jockey, towelhead, that has been the leader, the PM of a Middle Eastern country. I think I have the right. But that said, I just want to emphasize this before everyone has a fucking panic attack. I'm not an Israeli citizen. I'm an American citizen. It's up to Israel to decide what they want to do. If They want to do it. They don't want to do it. It's up to them. I got my own problems right here in the United States. I love Israel. I think they're doing a great job. It's not like the 1950s and 60s. There's a lot of mixing between the Middle Eastern and the Ashkenazi. And I think that maybe within the next couple decades, there is a Middle Eastern PM. And actually, I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing because I think a Middle Eastern PM of Israel maybe has more cultural similarities with the Arabs. We can't push these Arabs out of the Middle East. I just want to emphasize once more, because I know people are going to hate on me no matter what I say, no matter how many disclaimers I say. I know people are going to fucking call me a Saudi now, but I just want to emphasize that does not mean that the Ashkenazi did not make good contributions to Israel. They do. They're in the IDF. They serve the country. They protect the country. I have a lot of Ashkenazi Jewish friends. I'm not a racist. Nowhere did I say I'm a racist. They are my equal brothers. I don't think I'm better than them or less than them. I just think that maybe if at some point there's a Middle Eastern PM, I do think that they're going to get along with the Arabs a little bit better. I do think that because the Arabs can't look at someone like me. They can. No Arab looks at me and say I came from, Northern Europe. No Arab will ever say that to me. No Arab ever would even think to say I'm a foreign occupier. They literally look at me and they say, okay, this guy's. He's Jewish, Yahud. They say whatever, it's derogatory. That's fine. You always got that. But they won't say I'm foreign. And we have cultural similarities. We might have kebab. We might play chess, backgammon. We might have tea. We might talk about poetry, some of the similar poets. And there's similarities. And I do think that helps build bridges. That's why, for someone like me, I can have a conversation with Hassan in a way that maybe Barry Weiss, a, Ashkenazi lesbian, right, Jew, she might not have this relationship with Hassan, a Syrian, like I can. It doesn't mean she's bad. She probably can build better bridges with European Christians than I can, right? Mm-hmm. They look at me like a sand nigger, right? But when I have a conversation with Hassan about a Middle Eastern country, which is Israel is not in Europe. It's actually in the Middle East. So it is. You do get credibility, when I talk to these Arabs and Iranians, one reason I'm able to talk to these guys like Hassan is just, and then we get back to this main topic. It's just one of the main reasons is that we do have cultural similarities. And I think it's a shame that in American media, I think we could stop so much of the hate if we had more Middle Eastern Jews, but we don't in America. They're mostly in the Middle East. Here's mostly Ashkenazi, and Ashkenazi, they do a good job with some audiences, but they don't do a good job with other audiences. And it's a shame we don't have more representation because we should have more peace with the Muslims. We cannot wish 2 billion Muslims out of this world, guys. Mm. And I know that scares a lot of the Jews. And I know it's scary. And if you want, I can do my podcast for the next 50 podcasts with all Jews. And we can all talk about the Muslims. Or we can say, hey, you know what? Let's try to actually find a way to make this work because they're not going away. They're just not. You cannot get rid of 2 billion Muslims. So this is impossible. And they're growing and they're getting more and more. So we either find a way to make this work or what's the other choice? Right. And the other choice is not that good. Mm. We cannot just cancel these people. We cannot just fucking put them that actually antagonizes these people. We win this war. Okay, we won this war. They're going to do another attack. Who knows when they're going to do this next attack? Next attack's going to come. It's not like they're done. It's not like they say, okay, guys, we're finished. October 7th's over. They got the hostage. This is all done. No, it's not. We got incoming president coming in that's going to be probably hostile to Israel. Now, what do we have? This is my last thing. What do we actually have in common with the Muslims? Well, we have some things in common, believe it or not. They're not all our enemies. We don't have to antagonize these Muslims. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I know it's scary for some of you guys. It's not as scary for me because I grew up around Muslims, and I understand for a lot of European Jews, it's more scary than it is for me. I know, I get it. You're not as comfortable. I understand that. And I get it. But it's important that we switch our attitude and remember that we worship one God. Mm. He's an Arab. He's a Syrian. But him and I, Jewish man and an Arab, Muslim, we worship literally the same God of Abraham.
Mm.
And we do have similar laws. We do have similar lifestyle. For example, we have halal, he has kosher. We have ritual purity laws. We have fast days, right? We have modesty norms, right? And we got about 1,300 years of cultural exchange from, and I think, you look at the Jewish scholars like Maimonides. Maimonides wrote in Arabic.
Mm.
I mean, that was one of the most prolific Jewish philosophers and thinkers. I know we're about to get into the fun part of this conversation. It's just, don't worry, we're about to get it. So everyone, don't worry, we're about to get into it. But I just want to emphasize this, to the Jews and the Muslims. Let's we're gonna have the conversation, but let's just remember that the Jew and the Arab are cousins. The Jew and the Palestinian is our genetic cousin, and they deserve respect. And let's try to. We're gonna have this conversation. Let's also try to build bridges with these guys, man.
I appreciate your message, Nima, and I respect that. Honestly, you and I both know we have some serious disagreement, and it's wild to me because I've seen some of the hate you've gotten from some Jews on your positions on certain things. And the truth of the matter is, obviously, I see you as very pro-Israeli, and I frankly am very, very critical of Israel. And we have disagreement on that, but that doesn't stop us from having respectful engagement and dialogue. I honestly think that the Jews that have lived in the Middle East continuously for thousands of years, that were in Palestine, coexisting with the Palestinian people that are both Muslim and Christian, we've had a great and rich history together. The reality is, though, I think right now the way Israel is designed, it's going to lead to continuous conflict because basically Israel is trying to be a Jewish democracy. But if you factor in the Palestinians that are in the West Bank and in Gaza, Jews would not be a majority in what they're calling Israel. And so the only way for Israel to maintain being a Jewish state is to give less rights to those people, especially those in the West Bank and in Gaza, but not just that, those even within Jerusalem, within Israel as a whole. And when you have these different laws that apply to different people based on their religion in our current time, it's going to open up the door to conflict. And I think, unfortunately, I've had multiple clients that are Palestinian, and they just have had utter horror stories about how they've been treated by the Israeli authorities when over there. We just had a Tampa teenager, 15 years old, just recently released. Before that, we had Saifullah Maslat, who owns an ice cream shop here in Tampa. And I was telling his father, and he said, listen, one of his last conversations with me was about inviting me to go to their ice cream shop here in Tampa. And he was just visiting his family. And then some illegal settlers actually lynched him, and they prohibited the ambulance from going to pick him up until he passed away. What's interesting right now is I've heard, and you could tell me this correctly, I've heard that DNA tests in Israel are not allowed. Is that a thing? What I've seen studies that there's really high rates of skin cancer amongst a lot of the Jews there. And I think, again, a lot of that goes back to a lot of these people being immigrants from Europe that have lived in Europe for a very, very, generation after generation, that don't actually have strong ethnic ties to the land. And therefore their physical body isn't even suited to live in a healthy way in that land. And the problem is that they've, again, instituted laws that really harm the Palestinians there, and just treat them as second-class citizens, and that's going to lead to a lot of conflict. But I'd like to take this conversation back to, I think, where we can agree, which is, regardless, you and I are both Americans. I'm a proud American citizen. I say I'm an American by choice. My dad is an oral surgeon. You know what I'm saying? And my mom's a orthodontist. We could have lived anywhere in the world we wanted to. When you got money, you got options. You know what I'm saying? And we chose to live in America because we believe in the U.S. Constitution. We love how it brings different cultures together. We love the opportunities for growth and service and unity that this country represents. So we chose to live here. We chose to pay our tax dollars here. We chose to raise our children here because we love this land. It's not trying to take over or wishing anything nefarious. Life is short, man. I told you before we started the live stream, best part of my day when I come home and my 4-year-old runs up to me and gives me a hug and says, "Daddy's home." You got children, I got children. I want your children to grow up free and safe and secure, not afraid of losing their rights or, God forbid, their life because they come from a Jewish and Iranian background. You know what I'm saying? Same with my children. Some of my children, my children are growing up in this country. I don't want them to ever feel unsafe or unwelcome. And I think that requires us to all of us as Americans to work together to protect American liberty at home. My concern is, again, when I see the likes of Randy Fine and others, when I see the attack against Cair, the Governor Desantis had his first cabinet meeting after his election in Israel. You just saw Mamdani win recently. And one of the reasons he won is everybody was asking those running for the mayor of New York, where is your first trip going to be? And by the way, I got serious differences with Mamdani. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't represent my politics. I'm much more conservative. I take things very differently than him. But I think one of the reasons he won is everybody was talking about, where's your first trip going to be? And they all said Israel. He was the first that, listen, I'm elected as mayor of New York. I'm going to be here in New York, focusing on New York people issues. And I think, one of the issues that I hope we can agree on, more people can agree on, is let's just keep our tax dollars at home. Let's stay out of foreign conflict, and let's work on preserving liberty at home. Because I think the attack against Cair, and it isn't just the attack against Cair, there's other attacks as well that we've seen where we find that people are losing their First Amendment rights in America in order to protect Israel. I recently, was speaking with Sami Hamdi. He's a friend. He's a British national. He was here on a valid U.S. visa. People didn't like what he was saying about Israel. So, okay, we're going to revoke your visa. We're going to lock you up for a couple of weeks, and then we're going to deport you. Again, when people that are here legally, even if they're immigrants, but they face deportation because they criticize Israel, but not if they criticize America, and not if they criticize Trump, and not if they criticize you or I, but if they criticize a foreign nation, they may face deportation, they may lose their job. What I'm thinking is man, we as Americans, we might be losing our First Amendment. And I think people like you and I that are secure in our beliefs, we're not big fans of censorship. The reason is, let the best ideas win. Look, you're having me on your show today. I'm sure you might get a lot of hate for doing so, and I respect you for doing that. But it's because you're confident in your beliefs. You're looking for a common ground. You're realizing, at the end of the day, we're both influential people in our communities, and we got to find ways to have a healthy path forward for our children in this country. We believe in the marketplace of ideas. You know what I'm saying? So let people choose the best ideas, get behind that. And even when they disagree, let them prioritize. And I think for us right now, we got to prioritize the situation at home in America. And I think that's where you and I may find common ground, saying, let's just keep our tax dollars at home. Let's fix our country's problems. And let's never undermine American principles like freedom of speech for the benefit of any foreign nation. I don't want people losing their jobs because they criticize Qatar or they criticize Israel. Now, I haven't heard of anyone losing their job for criticizing Qatar, but I know people that have lost their job for criticizing Israel. And I think, I'm more concerned about, let's get back to the First Amendment. Let's protect the Constitution. Let's keep our tax dollars at home.
But yeah, I don't think anyone should lose their job because of free speech. I remember you defended a girl who I think had a Palestinian necklace. She lost her job.
Yeah, with Nordstrom. She got fired for wearing that.
I'm against that. I think that stuff antagonizes people. So in regards to Cair, okay, I guess the co-founders of Cair were identified by the FBI as having ties to terrorists, Hamas, and the Muslim Brotherhood. And then why would you say that Kamala Harris not only sent Cair a letter of support after that, but they also promoted Nahid Awad, I think.
Nihad Awad.
Yeah, to her task force on combating anti-Semitism.
So, listen, a few interesting things I'm gonna sort of push back on, and let's be very clear. If anyone affiliated with Cair provided any support, material support for terrorism and terrorists, we'd be the first to go after them. There's no nexus, there's no connection whatsoever between Cair, and terrorism. Now, let's be clear. You have members of Congress right now. You got to understand, Cair is America's largest American Muslim civil rights organization. I mean, and it's a federation. You have different chapters. Every chapter is independently funded, independently operated. So you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of staff, thousands of volunteers, and thousands more of donors that are all American. And I say that to say, listen, first of all, I don't believe any of the founding members, any of the executive leadership have ever committed any illegal activity or wrongdoing. Secondly, you have members of Congress that were convicted for breaking the law. You have members of Congress that were convicted for taking bribes. That doesn't mean Congress as a whole is some evil entity. But that being said, look, I mean, at the end of the day, Cair National was started to defend civil rights of the American Muslim community. And I think a lot of the same stereotypes, oh, Muslims are terrorists and all of this nonsense. Well, naturally, you're going to redirect that at the largest organization representing members of the American Muslim community. But there's never been any charges, any convictions of any Cair leadership in that regard. And at the end of the day, look, I know Cair Florida. I rebuilt it from the ground up, and I know exactly what we're about. And I've traveled the country, visited many Cair chapters. I mean, a lot of Cair chapters are literally just run by the nice auntie in the community who's just like wants to see her kids grow up free and safe. It's frankly, I think, an organization that does a lot of good work, but that has a long way to go. I mean, I think Cair is severely underfunded. I think they're understaffed. I think they really do a lot of work for the community. It's very thankless. It's very grueling. It's very difficult. And I respect them. And I support them. I support the great work that they do. You know what I'm saying? I may not agree with every strategic choice they've made. I may not agree with every initiative. I may not agree with every staff member. We may have serious disagreements. I mean, I remember once getting in a fight with a particular Cair chapter because they wanted to support the legalization of gay marriage. And I'm a conservative traditional Muslim, you know, and I'm like, listen, I will never support hatred of anyone who's homosexual or violence against them, but I can't be true to my faith principles and support legalizing gay marriage. So again, I pushed back against it. Another Cair chapter leader wanted to endorse it. And we got, and I threatened to leave the Cair union if they proceeded with that, because again, I don't feel like I could be a sincere Muslim and support gay marriage. Again, that doesn't mean I would ever support violence against somebody who's homosexual, but it's inconsistent with our faith values. So Cair is a diverse organization. It's local, community led. And again, I just think the today's political attack against it by Desantis is just that. It's a political attack. It's utter rubbish, and it's actually sort of humorous if you know the Cair family inside and out like I do.
Hassan, you say I'm curious about this. So when you say that the Cair founders or executive leadership has never committed any wrongdoing, and that the organization is just misunderstood. So how would you reconcile that with the DOJ filing Cair as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation?
So that's a great question. I was actually going to bring it up.
Hold on. In the Holy Land Foundation, the Hamas funding case, and the FBI literally confirming that there were ties between Cair's founders and the Muslim Brotherhood's Palestine Committee.
Excellent question. So I'm glad you brought it up. I was actually going to bring it up because I think that's sort of the more accurate, perhaps, thing you were trying to reference, which is that Cair, along with, I think, over 100 other American Muslim organizations, were listed as unindicted co-conspirators in the Holy Land case. And man, as an attorney, I can tell you there's just so many issues with it. Number one is they were not indicted. And that's a big issue. As anyone who goes to law school, we all have the law professor that said you could indict a ham sandwich. I mean, the bar to indict someone and something is so low that it's very easy to get someone indicted on something. And that's the fact of the matter. They weren't indicted. A federal judge has even actually said that the releasing of that list, because it paints the organizations, not just Cair, but many other organizations, in a false light, was actually a violation of the organizations and its members' civil rights. There was no wrongdoing. They were not indicted. The Holy Land Foundation trial is in my mind, is something that I actually believe it reflects a breakdown of the justice system. The gentlemen that were convicted ultimately, I mean, they were providing charity to the same organizations and groups on the ground that USAID was supporting, that the United Nations was supporting. And it's like, dude, if federal government agencies thought that these organizations were legitimate to provide support for, then how are these, people living in the U.S. supposed to know that they weren't supposed to do that? Again, they were providing humanitarian aid. Apparently, the allegations are that some of the groups receiving the humanitarian aid coordinated with Hamas, which was the elected government leadership on the ground in Gaza. So I think there's challenges, right? Because if we're providing humanitarian aid and Hamas is in charge, it's a very risky thing to do, given I think the kind of material support laws that are out there. But there was never any evidence that they actually provided funding for any sort of terrorist attack or anything like that. So I really see the Holy Land Foundation case as a political hit job. I do believe that the Holy Land board members that served jail were persecuted. And I will tell you this, brother, I've had former U.S. attorneys talk about this case in particular to me off the record. I won't name them out of respect for their privacy. And they said, listen, your community wasn't prosecuted. They were persecuted. It was a political hit job. They relied on secret evidence. They relied on testimony of undercover Israeli Mossad agents whose identity wasn't even disclosed to the defense. I think there were serious due process issues with that entire case. So I take it one step further. First of all, I reject the entire Holy Land Foundation convictions. I believe they were travesty of justice. But to take it a step back, it's irrelevant when it comes to Cair, because again, they were not indicted. Every major Muslim organization at that time was placed on the unindicted co-conspirator list. That list should have never been released, and it just has no legal standing in terms of what they've done.
Hassan, so as you know, I'm glad we're getting into this, because it's interesting. Because so the Holy Land Foundation defendants were just giving to the same groups that USAID and the UN supported. But there's a big but, was that the US prosecutors, they presented internal, I think it was the Palestine Committee documents, and that had literally the intent to give money to terrorist Hamas that held hostages of innocent Israeli citizens. And so that was actually not general charity, if we're fair. So I'm curious. So are you saying that the federal evidence? And I'm not a lawyer like you. I don't know jurisprudence like you. My IQ is only 91. I'm actually not. I went to community college. I'm not fancy like you. I didn't get that fancy brain power or fancy intellectual power.
Bro, you're doing pretty well for yourself. Regardless,
I mean, I'm not a lawyer. You know what I mean? I can't do it like you. But I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I ask you as a lawyer, so are you saying that the federal evidence itself was wrong? And hold on. Or that Hamas linked charities should still be considered legitimate because Hamas was elected in Gaza?
No. What I'm saying is, I think the way the case worked, if I recall correctly, was that they ultimately relied both on secret evidence and secret witness testimony, which has serious due process violations for them to build the case. And essentially, I believe what it came down to was this whole argument. Now, look, let me be very clear. I mean, I think any organization operating in Gaza, in Palestine, you got to be extra careful to be strictly within the confines of U.S. law. There's just no playing around with it. Let's be expressly clear. That being said, my understanding is the logic was that the Holy Land was providing actual humanitarian aid inside Gaza, but that by them providing humanitarian aid in Gaza, that freed up Hamas resources so that they could then use for militant purposes. So that's my understanding of the case. It's been so long since I've looked it up, but from what I remember when I had reviewed it, that was sort of my understanding. Look, and federal law is very clear. I mean, you cannot knowingly provide material support, not only to organizations designated by the federal government as foreign terrorist organizations, but you can't even provide support for groups that work with such groups. So it's but I believe it was politicized. Like, I don't think the guys behind the Holy Land Foundation or who were incarcerated, from my understanding and from what I reviewed, were about violence or about causing harm. I believe that they were genuinely trying to provide support for starving women and children. I mean, dude, Gaza, quite frankly, if October 7th, didn't happen and the situation continued, I still think the same amount of civilians would have died in Gaza. It's just they would have died a lot slower. I mean, people in Gaza have been starving. Israel counts the calories there. There's serious nutritional and just health issues. I mean, Gaza was called the biggest open air prison. So I think the problem for some of these Palestinian Americans that got caught up with it is that they legitimately just want to feed their people. But by feeding their people, they expose themselves to, these allegations of supporting Hamas. I don't believe they did. I believe the argument was by them providing aid to people on the ground, it freed up Hamas resources for militant purposes. And that was sort of what ultimately happened in that situation.
So let's say I'm with you on the fact that the Holy Land's Foundation's logic was that their humanitarian aid was indirectly, freed up Hamas resources. Let's just say that, okay? However, the U.S. prosecutors, they also were arguing that the leaders inside the Palestinian committee literally knew that the money was getting sent directly to the terrorist Hamas that was holding innocent Israeli civilians and raping the innocent Israeli women, civilians, raping them. And they were Hamas terrorist-controlled Zakat committees. So would you say your position that these U.S. prosecutors misunderstood the evidence, or that maybe Hamas-controlled institutions were, I guess, just unavoidable and therefore acceptable partners?
Yeah. So again, ultimately what the Holy Land Foundation, you got to remember, the Holy Land Foundation was the largest American Muslim charity at the time. And it would send money to Zakat committees, both in the West Bank and the Gaza. The government's argument was that these Zakat committees were controlled by Hamas, even though those Zakat committees were actually not designated as terrorist organizations, and they worked with international NGOs and even the UN, and the US government gave support to those organizations. So my thinking is the defendants in those cases were like, well, okay, we're giving the money. So they never, to be clear, there was never accusations they gave money directly to Hamas. There was no government allegations, and you could look this up. There was no government allegations that HLF funded violence directly. And the allegations were not that they provided evidence to Hamas, financial to Hamas. It was that they gave financial support to the Zakat committees. And these Zakat committees also received UN support and had previously received American support. So, you got to look at it from the perspective of the defendants. Like, they're sending money to Zakat. Zakat means charity committees that the US aid funded, that the UN funded. So they're like, okay, these groups must be legit. Let's send it over. What happened in the trial? In the trial, anonymous Israeli intelligence agents testified under a pseudonym. The defense could not challenge the testimony. They couldn't challenge the witnesses because, again, they don't even know who they really are. And the prosecutors argued basically that even if the committees provided humanitarian aid services, supporting them freed Hamas resources. Those were legally novel arguments at the time. This wasn't how you normally prosecuted terrorism before then. This was like the first time such an argument was presented. So again, the defendants weren't even on notice. That's really my position on it ultimately in terms of that trial. They used secret evidence, they used anonymous intelligence officers, and ultimately convicted these people for providing aid to groups, not Hamas, but to Zakat groups that the US government used secret intelligence to claim were linked to Hamas. Meanwhile, from the defendant perspective, they're like, well, USA gave money to these groups, the UN gave money to these groups. We were just trying to help our people and feed them. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that I I don't think there's any evidence of any Israeli involvement in this. I don't think this maybe had nothing to do with Israel. However,
No, look it up. They
well,
used.
hold on, Hassan, hold on.
Yeah.
But let's just follow that train of thought for a second. All right, let's just assume. So okay, so you're pointing out that an anonymous Israeli intelligence agent testified under pseudonyms, right? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so let's just say, and the defense, they couldn't cross-examine them, right? And let's just say that, right? That's what you just said, right?
Right.
So, but the jury, Hassan, they still convicted, okay? Like completely convicted after reviewing thousands of internal documents, from the Palestine Committee. This is not like this unanimously, bro, unanimously. So are you saying that the conviction rested mainly on some random intelligence agent from Israel named Moshe, who was a witness? Or do you think that the internal documents themselves were misinterpreted or unreliable?
It's a great question. So I don't know if you know this, Nima, but there was actually 2 trials, and they weren't convicted in the first trial. So in the first trial, and this is something that's very interesting in the American legal system, and I don't know how we ended up this way, but I would push for change, to be honest, and maybe it's the defense lawyer in me. But the first jury was a hung jury. They couldn't reach a unanimous decision. So the first trial lasted 2 months, and they couldn't convict them in the first trial. So they had to do a whole second trial a year later, and only in the second trial were they convicted. And that in the second trial is where they used the anonymous Israeli intelligence testimony and the theory that they were that the Zakah committees were Hamas controlled, and they ultimately prevailed in the second trial. So I think that speaks volumes. Like in my mind, with the U.S. Constitution, basic interpretation. And again, I know this isn't a mainstream accepted position, but my thinking is, look, the U.S. Constitution protects anyone from being tried twice, and it prohibits anyone from being convicted unless it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So in my mind, if you have a hung jury, if the whole jury doesn't agree to convict, and the majority doesn't even agree to convict, and there's a hung jury, then I would say the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt wasn't met. And then the double jeopardy law should apply that they shouldn't. But for some reason in the US, I don't even quite understand this, to be honest, which is if you don't have a unanimous jury decision, then they'll try you again. But I'm like, well, if you're thinking proving beyond a reasonable doubt, if the jury didn't agree, then it's not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And then you have double jeopardy. It shouldn't have been tried twice. Again, this isn't a mainstream legal position that I'm sharing. It's just sort of my sort of view of the Constitution, and I think how things should be. But yeah, I mean, they weren't even convicted in the first trial, and it was a 2-month trial, and there was a hung jury, and then they had to redo it. I think it was actually just the post 9/11 fear and hysteria. I really, Nima, I would encourage you to actually speak with like the children of the Holy Land Foundation members. I would actually, some of them have been since released, speak to them as well. Like, these do not come off as people that ever supported violence against civilians or terrorism. I genuinely believe they were just trying to provide charitable support for their people, and they just happened to provide support to the same groups USAID was, and they were convicted at a time when just the Muslims were the boogeyman, and I think the government was trying to overcompensate from 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say the Muslims is the boogeyman. I would have never want any Muslim in the United States to live in fear for practicing their faith, provided they're not hurting anybody.
Right.
And it actually bothers me to see Islamophobia, bothers me to see anti-Semitism. I actually don't like saying anti-Semitism. It's just Jew hatred,
Yeah.
And I think as Americans, we're generally better than that. So we're talking about you're right. That in the first trial, the jury was hung. You're right about that. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the second trial, there was literally thousands, Hassan, thousands of internal Palestine Committee documents. They had literally financial records anyone can fact check me. They literally had financial records, and the Zakat committee evidence. The jury returned it again, unanimous conviction, which is maybe contrary to what you just said. So do you believe that the conviction happened because a random, unanimous Israeli agent came all the way here, named Moshe, did a testimony, okay, tipped the scales, or because the additional year of evidence, hard, cold evidence, gave prosecutors a strong factual case?
No, I really think the anonymous Israeli intelligence played a big part, bro. I'm gonna blame the Jews on this one. I say that jokingly, but I think the anonymous Israeli.
All right, we can move on from this. All right, but go ahead, finish what you say on this. We'll go.
No, but I do think it played I
Yeah.
do think it played a big part, and I think beyond just the Holy Land Foundation, again, this whole unindicted co-conspirator list, again, they weren't indicted. They weren't indicted. There was nothing to indict. Trust me, the hysteria against Muslims back then, if they had anything on us, they would have thrown the book on us. I mean, I did grow up being scared, bro. I mean, to this very day. I mean, yesterday when I saw Desantis, sign the executive order, I'm like starting to call my lawyers. I'm starting to make my emergency contacts list if anything happens to me. I didn't know if the FDLE was going to try to break down my door. You know what I'm saying? You just don't know. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I don't want to feed into the hysteria and the fear. I don't want people to be scared. So I know myself. I know we live by the book. We live by the Constitution. We protect the Constitution. We don't engage in any illegal activity. We're here to make America the best it can be. But it is scary growing up as a Muslim post 9/11, bro. I mean, I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I think you experienced this when you visited Israel. I've experienced this a lot here in America, bro, where random inspection, go in for random inspection. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I posted a video today. Check it out on my Instagram with Jacob Berger, a Jewish actor who's also very anti-Israel, being stopped while Muslim. I mean, it's a common thing growing up. I remember being placed in handcuffs, crossing the border, coming into the U.S. when I was a teenager. Again, I said, what did I do? Nothing. It's just protocol. You're just on the watch list. And this was before my years at Cair. It's why I joined Cair. It's why I became a lawyer. I became a lawyer because growing up, bro, there's a book, I don't know if I got it behind me here, called The Enemies Within. And in this book, they literally speak about how the NYPD was spying on my very own sermons and my MSA at the University of Buffalo. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so no one can deny, like, we grew up under a lot of surveillance. We grew up with significant fear of the government, not because we were doing anything wrong, but because of the fear and the hysteria and the profiling. But what always gave us hope was the Constitution, really. We believe in the Constitution. There's a lot of Americans that would stand up for it. I think you would stand up for it. If the government started targeting me just because I was affiliated with Cair, but I was a civil rights lawyer, you'd be the first to hashtag free Hassan, I'm sure, I hope.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll be honest with you, man. Like, despite the fact that I do completely support the innocence Israeli civilians from terrorist attacks, right? I support Jewish people, and I know what you're saying where we differ, right? However, my dad's mom, wore the chador in Farsi, chador, like the veil.
Right, the veil.
Yeah, and she was visiting from Iran, and she stayed with us for about a year or two. A lovely woman, and I miss her so much. I named my daughter, her middle name, Zahra. And
oh, beautiful. That's my daughter's middle name too.
Oh, really? A small world. See what I'm saying? We got cultural similarities, you and me, so it's a beautiful name, man, and so I did it because I wasn't in Iran when she died. And I felt bad about that. So I did it as a reminder. Even now I'm thinking of her, that was the point of it. I married a German woman. But the reason I'm telling you this is because after 9/11, I remember I was in a community college course, and there was a question I asked about 9/11, and the professor expelled me. And I got kicked out of, I guess, the college or the course. And I was scared, because my grandmother was my dad's mom was a Muslim woman, so I remember she would actually, one of the funny, crazy is how happy she would get when she would call me a dirty Jew. It was, my grandma would, cause it was not dirty Jew. She would call me something else, but it was like Jew, cause she knew I was Jewish, but, I was mixed. So, the reason I'm saying this is I actually do empathize, and you're right. When I'm in Israel, not when I'm on my way to Israel, I have been stopped.
Mm.
And I do empathize with the Palestinians in a way that maybe an Ashkenazi person would not. So I'm not going to deny that. Yeah, you're right. There's no doubt about it. So my understanding is that most Arabs do not like the Muslim Brotherhood, do not like Cair, do not like Hamas, are against terrorism. Most Muslims in the United States aren't that actually. Most Arabs and Iranians aren't that religious. They're tax paying. Maybe they assimilate. I know many Iranians assimilate. Syrians, maybe they assimilate, right? Steve Jobs was a Syrian, right? He was mixed, right? His father was Syrian, I think. So why do you think that the most extremist voices, radical voices in the Muslim community are just rising to the top, while many of the reformers are just so marginalized, man?
Nima, I always appreciate your question, but I'm going to push back a little bit on the question first, and then I'll see what I can do.
Good, man. Yo, I just want to say one thing, man. Cair got a very, very, very high IQ guy, man. I can understand why a lot of guys are scared to get you on, bro. You're good, man.
I appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak. And me, I don't like to interrupt or anything, but I'm not afraid to challenge the question itself, which is, again, you sort of conflated like three completely different things, which is Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and Cair, right? And I would say each are very, very different, right? So let's start a little bit with the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's the wild thing, man. The first time I heard of the Muslim Brotherhood was really after I had started working for Cair for years, and I started hearing the attacks about us that were Muslim Brotherhood. I'm like, bro, I moved to America when I was 4 years old. I went to law school in New York. I was a registered Democrat. Now I think I'm switching more Republican leaning, to be honest. Don't even know the first thing about the Muslim Brotherhood growing up. Really, I don't. I started looking into it more and more, post hearing all these attacks. But the first thing I will say is Cair is not Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood is very different than Hamas. But essentially, you have to understand that the Muslim Brotherhood is a loose affiliation of a political party that is transnational, that was formed in response to corrupt dictatorships in the Middle East, and their biggest real enemy were the local corrupt dictatorships that were persecuting the people locally. And I think the best way to sort of understand the Muslim Brotherhood is to sort of look at the Democrat or the Republican Party, right? So you have Democrats and you have Republicans. They, in essence, are big political parties. Now, be honest with me. Has any terrorist come out of a Republican or a Democrat? You know the answer. The answer is yes. I mean, look at the guy who shot Charlie Kirk. Look at the people who've blown up abortion clinics. I don't support abortion. Look up the KKK. Look up certain extreme elements of Antifa. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. So you've had really bad people that were members of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And I think it's the same with the Muslim Brotherhood. With the Muslim Brotherhood, you've had, and now they're sort of designating these things. But again, it's such a loose, there isn't like one entity called the Muslim Brotherhood. Again, it's just a very vague, big political movement that goes back decades and decades, that's, in different countries. And that's why even with the US, it's like, okay, certain chapters, because they recognize, I think, the legal and the political issue of broad brushing. So I see it no different. I think there's Democrats and there's Republicans, and there's been terrorist groups that have come out of both. And there's been terrorists that have come out of both. But we don't say the Democrats or the Republicans are terrorists, although sometimes you hear that, right? I mean, you hear some Democrats calling Republicans fascists. and you hear some Republicans calling the Democrats utter terrorists. And honestly, if some of these guys could, I guarantee you there's Republicans that would outlaw the Democrats, and there's Democrats that would outlaw the Republicans. But I think that's a sign of weakness, is when you want to just label an entire loose political entity as something evil. Evil can come from anyone. I mean, there's evil Jews, evil Muslims, evil Christians, evil atheists. Doesn't mean Christianity is bad, Islam is bad, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So that's my whole thing. I would just see the Muslim Brotherhood as a very loose, non-issue, non-singular entity. Now, Hamas, very clear, was an organization that was founded really post-Israel and was violent resistance towards Israeli occupation. And for me, to be honest with you, I've seen Israel kill a lot more civilians than Hamas, So, and I have issue with people, and I know this could get me in trouble, but the reality is, again, I don't provide any material support. I don't financially support. I don't offer any political support, but I do ask questions. And the question that I ask is, it's like what the Syrian president just said, because they just asked him at the Doha Forum. I think it was Anna Ampur who asked him. She said, you are a former terrorist. I mean, he was designated as a terrorist before, and now you're a political leader. And he's like, well, I think the definition of terrorism is very subjective. If we look at terrorism as being defined by killing civilians to achieve political objectives, we see that with Israel, but they're not called a terrorist state. And I think, but Iran was called, and you're sort of like, part Irani, part Israeli. Well, why was one part called a terrorist state and not the other? I just think it's politics, brother. So I think these loose names, loose terms are weak and meaningless. They're politicized. I'm more concerned with individual action. So if an individual has harmed a civilian, that individual should be in trouble. If an individual supported an entity that harms civilians, they need to be held accountable. But loose political names are problematic. Now, let's talk about Cair. Cair is neither Muslim Brotherhood nor is it Hamas. And with that being said, it is the largest representative of the American Muslim community. I think more Muslims would say that Cair represents them than any other organization. And I would see them as mainstream and moderate. Absolutely. In fact, I was director of Cair for 10 years. And bro, Cair, by the way, Cair's national executive director, Nihad Awad, was put on a hit list by ISIS. They were literally targeted by ISIS because, again, they're seen as too liberal, I guess, or too secular. I don't know. I mean, you got to add, the ISIS criminal thug nut jobs, what they're thinking, you know what I'm saying? But so ultimately, I see Cair as mainstream and representative of the American Muslim community. With that being said, to challenge the question, let's get to what you're asking about, which is why some of the wilder voices get more attention. Because, bro, me and you meeting together to talk about peace, even if we had 100 of our friends in the room talking about how we can build a freer and safer America, will not get as much attention as me going out in the middle of the street in Tampa and shouting death to Jews. You know what I'm saying? Or death to America. If I were to do that, I would never do that. But if I were to do that, can you imagine the attention it would get? And this is the problem. It's the fringe element. It's if a nut job, literally mentally handicapped individual, goes out and does something stupid and crazy and evil, it'll get so much attention. But when people come together for peace, we don't get the attention.
It's interesting, man. I feel like a part of it is like admitting things. I think it's very hard for people to admit. I was having dinner with a friend last night, and it's hard for people to admit when their own party does something wrong because they're very scared that if they do it, then the opposition will like use it against them,
Mm-hmm.
So like, I'll give you an example. Okay. Like, I think most IDF soldiers overall have a very high standard of morality and ethics. I think that no military in the world is held to the standard of morality and ethics that the IDF goes beyond, out of their way to avoid civilian casualties. Hamas will go out of their way to hide behind their women and children. I know you and I are separate on that, but the reason I'm saying this is because I do think there are some IDF soldiers that maybe, they were going through PTSD, or maybe they just were fucking bad, and they did do something that was very inhumane to innocent Palestinians. But I don't think they represent the majority. However, I will admit this, that maybe there were a few that shamed the brave men and women of the IDF who uphold a high moral standard. Now, that said, that's me admitting something. Okay. Don't look at me like that, Shaz.
I'm gonna wait to my turn. I'm waiting my turn.
No, I know you're fucking disgusted with me. I know, but it's just
no, that's actually. You'll see my response in a minute.
Hold on, okay, but okay. So that's that. Okay, that's me admitting. And I say this respectfully. You ran one of the most powerful Muslim advocacy groups in the state of Florida. Looking back now, what is the biggest lie you believe Cair tells the American public?
Bro, you're a master of framing. It's how you ask the questions. You're just framing, and I respect that. But
so I'm just laughing because you're laughing at this point, bro. I was a serious question. I admit it, bro. I admit it. I admit it, bro.
It's like me asking, when was the last time you lied to your mother? Bro, I didn't lie to her. No, when was the last time you lied to your mother? Did you stop cursing your mother? I never cursed, but when did you stop cursing? But listen.
No, serious question though. Serious question.
So let me get into it real quick. So a couple things. Number one is, Nima, knowing you, and look, I could be mistaken, but I tend to see the good in everyone, and I really believe if you have more time, I think you would. And I know you're gonna, I don't want to say anything to build resentment against you from the Jewish community in particular, because I know you've had some conflicts with some people that frankly are racist and disrespectful, to be honest. But the truth of the matter is, I think given more time, I think your position on the IDF would shift. I think they have, as part of their policies, like the Hannibal Directive. I mean, the Hannibal Directive, it's like per their policy to kill their own civilians and their own soldiers rather than let them be taken hostages. I think the bombing that we've seen, I think by Israel's own data, about 80% of the civilians, 80% of those killed were civilians. You can't do that unless you have a policy. So they actually have policies about what's an acceptable civilian death rate, and there's actually use AI programs. And so if someone is at this level in Hamas, they're okay with killing like 1,000 civilians. If someone's at this level, they're okay with 100. If someone's at this level, they're okay with 10. And so they make these calculations, which I guess people who support them can justify. But the more you look into how the IDF operates, I think it's institutionally problematic. And I think that's also why you see a lot of high suicide rates from those that have served in the IDF. I think a lot of people are very, very unhappy with what they've done during their service. And ultimately, I think it just takes time. And what also bothers me, like I've seen this, I can send this to you, but there's like Israeli group chats, like Telegram chats, where they share like the images of killed Palestinian children, where they share the IDF soldiers like in lingerie from the stuff they've taken, and it's got like tens of thousands of likes. So again, I actually appreciate, because I think you were trying to make an olive branch saying, listen, IDF has some bad guys, and I'm willing to admit that. I don't think it represents the institution. Obviously, I would push back and say, no, I think the IDF is more problematic. And I think you're going to shift your position given time. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think we can both vehemently disagree with each other and still have a healthy dialogue. And I think that sets a powerful example, because I don't think a lot of people are willing and able to do that. Like, I think, I have serious issues. Like, I'll be honest, I'm just speaking from the heart, like unfiltered. I have serious issues with people supporting the IDF after what I've seen happen in Gaza over the last year or two. And so it's easy to sort of write people off when they disagree with me on this. And I think a lot of people do. And I think it's hard to have dialogue. But I've learned, I think that, at the end of the day, just if people are willing to engage, let's keep engaging. And I think the truth will always win when there's sincerity. So we'll see what happens on that. We'll see if time shifts you on that. But to jump into, I don't know that there's any lies that Cair is telling the American public. Like, literally, dude, I got to tell you again, and I think we mentioned this in the beginning, but for your newer viewers, like, I joined Cair Florida right out of law school. I was the only full-time staff member. I grew it to have 25 staff, 8 offices. I read one of the comments here, like, why does Cair spend billions? Bro, Cair spend billions. I wish we had $1 billion amongst all of the whole Cair network, bro. We don't, man. I mean, listen, I started at, be very open, bro. When I started as executive director of Cair in Tampa, my first year salary was $45,000. That was my first year salary as their executive director. Next year was $55,000. Third year was $65,000. I barely broke $100,000 a year, and I had a family of 5. Supporting a family of 5 on $100,000 is really not that much nowadays. I mean, quite frankly. So the point is, like, we're just a grassroots, down to earth community organization. I think, I'm trying to think, like, what there's sometimes approaches that Cair has taken that I might disagree with strategically, politically. My man saying 100,000 is good money, not for a family, bro. Nowadays, just look at the latest data. $100,000 is like what you need to support a family of 1 nowadays with the current market and the current economy. I know some people might listen to us and be like, "Oh, these guys are so bougie," but trust me, if you got a family of 4 or 5, 100 grand is not a lot of money, man. Yeah.
Let me. Sorry to cut you off, man.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's very heartbreaking for me, man, that many Jewish men went to a war they didn't ask for, and they come back and they get shamed by global media, and they commit suicide. These are Jewish men. I could have been one of those Jewish men. He went to fight the Hamas beast terrorist who did October 7th, and they come back injured. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart when a Jewish man commits suicide. Honestly, it breaks my heart when any man commits suicide. It's definitely a lot of PTSD. I guess you could say, with the soldiers coming back from Israel, just defending their country. Where I want to push back is that, there is high suicide rates among IDF veterans. And you're saying that that's, I guess, proof of institutional guilt. However, if we're fair, if we're objective, I know the world likes to put Israel on a special pedestal, but if we're fair, the suicide rates are also high right here in America with our U.S. combat veterans, and they're also.
To be honest, it's a bit high across.
Hold on, Hassan. Hold on.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, it's like we are American citizens after all. Our American combat veterans who fought ISIS, who fought the Taliban. So, do you believe that indicates institutional moral failure in the U.S. military as well, or is it just more about the psychological toll of fighting, urban terrorist groups?
You've asked a really good question. And again, I want to be just clear. Sometimes just because I stay quiet, it doesn't mean I agree with the frame, but I'll always engage with you on it. So a couple of things. I'll be honest with you. I do think, and it breaks my heart, but I do think a lot of the American involvement in wars over the last several decades has been wrong. I think, we didn't need to be in Iraq. We didn't need to be in Afghanistan. We didn't need to go in all these countries and set our soldiers there. And, you look at Abu Ghraib, not just Abu Ghraib. I mean, there's been many instances where even U.S. Military individuals committed terrible crimes against humanity. There's been documented incidents, a young girl in Iraq raped and her family killed by American servicemen, some of these guys have been caught, they've been tried, they've been prosecuted. I think the problem in Israel is you have greater acceptance of these crimes. So there were, right now, one of the Israeli, I guess, defense ministers or generals, someone high up in Israel. She went on suicide watch and she went missing. And I think they incarcerated her because she allegedly leaked the videos of Israeli soldiers raping Palestinians. And, people can look this up for themselves. But when these Israeli soldiers raped these Palestinian prisoners, they went on national TV afterwards justifying it. They didn't deny it. They justified it, And then you had protests outside of the jail, and you had protests in Israel where people were protesting the rights of Israeli soldiers to rape. So I want to be clear. Look, again, I love America, but I don't believe that our foreign intervention, and this is why I'm America first and America only, benefited the American people, the average American citizen, or the average American soldier. I think they benefited these companies like Halliburton, Lockheed Martin, these politicians who go into Congress with $1 million net worth and leave with $100 million net worth, with their insider trading. I think that's who's been benefiting from these conflicts. And some of these soldiers, I do believe that if you're fighting a just war, and you're fighting a just war within the rules that God has ordained, like not harming civilians, and being people of chivalry and honor, I believe you wouldn't come back with that kind of PTSD that you come back when you're fighting either an unjust war or a war that you don't engage in the right rules of engagement. I do believe people get haunted.
Yeah. Hold on, real quick. If you're talking about the high suicide rate, IDF rates, right, as a proof of institutional moral failure, what would you say to if I told you that the suicide rates in the IDF are actually lower than the U.S. military or any comparable?
I want to be clear. Look, I think it was a low blow on my part to use the suicide rates, and the reason
I gave you a low blow too, though, in your defense. I gave you a low blow with the lie one, so I'll give you that. I think we might have lost you, man. Hassan, I think it froze. Yeah, I think it froze, but until Hassan comes back, I guess I'll just take it from here, guys. I think his camera froze. One thing I want to say is that he says, and I don't want to do this behind his back, so I'm just saying this publicly. Hassan, I hope you come back and you can look at what I said. I'm not going to do any low blows now that he's gone either. I just want everyone to understand, though, that the notion that, okay, I think he'll come back. I think the notion that Israel has here we go, coming back. Hassan,
Nima, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
My whole home internet went out, so I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
But
yeah. Yeah, no, I want to say something here, because so we were talking about the IDF soldiers, but there was something else you said also, man, and you said something about the policy that Israel allowed killing 1,000 civilians depending on the rank of a Hamas member, I guess. So I just want you to know, man, that
right.
Yeah, but I just want you to know that there's literally no open source evidence anywhere that exists of, I would say, any Israeli doctrine that assigns an acceptable civilian death quota tied to the rank of a Hamas operative. And I think that might have came
Let me
from,
send you.
Yeah. Hold on. Because there's interpretations of that. There's interpretations you may have seen by, you might have just looked online that came from propagandists. Maybe from China, Qatar, but no IDF document like that exists. That's a fact. And then also the IDF's, documented, doctrine. That's largely, man, that's just based on international humanitarian law. They have a proportionality framework. You probably can explain it better than me. I'm not a lawyer. And that's basically, it's debated, man. It's criticized, and but there's literally no numerical codified quota, and that might have just been. I don't think you. And I'm not saying you did that intentionally, where you just said that, but there's that claim. Okay, literally lacks any verifiable documentation, and it's completely reliant on unconfirmed, I guess you could call it a interpretive source. That's not. I don't think any intelligence agents. I don't think any law. I don't think any agency would say that was like agency level evidence.
So I'll send you my resources on it, and
Yeah,
let
I'd
me
like to
know
see
what you
it.
think about it. Honestly, I'll share it with you. I mean, you and I, we have a continuing conversation. I think it's enriching. So I'll send you
And,
my resources on that. But
and Hassan,
and for me, brother, go
yeah.
ahead.
One more thing I want to just push back on too, because it was interesting when you were talking about.
Hmm.
I don't, in the Israeli military, they truly do go out of their way to. I know you don't think that. I think that. I know you don't think that. So Israel has something. It's called gospel. You may have heard of it. It's something called
Hmm.
lavender, and it's basically just like this AI assisted target generation tool. Because I think you said something about AI systems decide civilian death allowances. You said something like this, but nothing in the available, I would say, intelligence ever anywhere will indicate that AI is assigning some civilian casualty threshold. But the AI that they have, yeah, that's assisting in like pattern analysis, which is that's the purpose, right? So, but the proportionality of it, this is very important. The proportionality decisions of that um, still legally uh, require human commanders, and those human commanders are under um, Israeli and international law. That's a fact. So when you say that, I just want you to know it's sort of conflating. It's sort of conflating, if we're honest, that AI assisted target identification with the AI making um, like this lethal authority decisions when that's just not accurate, bro. It's not.
Look, I'll send
Yes, it's not. It's
look, I'll send you my resources on it. I'll send you my resources on it. I mean, they also have a program called Where's Daddy, and with Where's Daddy, it's actually specifically designed where they do the bombing once the target has returned home, and it's very incredulously called Where's Daddy because the idea is Daddy's home, and so when they take him out, they take his whole family with him. Look, I think that I reject very strongly the position you do have about the morality of Israel's army, and I think just people can the proof is in the pudding. People can see for themselves the situation of Gaza. I know the talking points is all, Hamas is hiding. Well, is Hamas hiding in every single civilian building that they're destroyed? Is all of Gaza Hamas? Maybe that's the argument. But it's just the utter carnage. I mean, tens of thousands of civilians killed. You can't do that by accident. You can't accidentally have an 80% kill rate. And then the other thing, I mean, again, people can Google, protests supporting rape in Israel. You had so much support for the protests, people protesting, supporting Israel's soldiers' right to rape people. I don't believe the Israeli army is moral. I believe they allow people to get away with killing civilians all the time. My own client, he was beaten by the Israeli police, Tarek Abu Khader, and his cousin was killed, stabbed. Muhammad Abu Khader was a 15-year-old, and then he was doused with fire and burned to death, not held accountable. The police officers who beat Tarek were not held accountable. There's a culture of impunity. But look, let's be clear, Nima, I get it because remember, I'm Syrian, okay? I don't think, let me be clear with you, and I think this is where we disagree, but I think you can respect my position.
yeah.
I don't think the Israeli army is any different than the Syrian army. And you may not like this, but it's actually a very fair position. Not the current Syrian army, the previous Syrian army. I think both the Syrian and the Israeli army had a mandate and authority and permission to abuse civilians and them both. I think it's sort of a again sort of a result of any group, any minority group trying to maintain authority over a majority Middle Eastern autocracy, dictatorship approach. Now, again, when it comes to Syria, it was Assad who was, I think, is some sort of fringe minority, Alawite element. They were controlling the vast majority of Sunni population. When it comes to Israel, it's a Jewish
military trying to control a Palestinian population. And let's be real, I think there's a level amongst both of ethnocentrism where both thought they were better than the people that they were in control over. Both saw resistance from them as barbarism, and both felt like they had legitimacy to crush the opposition. And I know you and I may disagree on this, but I want you to know that at least I'm sort of fair. I condemn this former Syrian army. I condemn Assad. I condemn the foreign Syrian government, and I do the same for Israel. I just don't think they were that different, to be honest.
You're fair. You just committed. You just compare Assad, bro. I mean, come on, man. That's a nice way.
So,
you make it very sweet. You make it very sound so sweet. It's like, yeah, bro.
Well, I'm gonna have people that are gonna I'm gonna have people that are gonna hate on me for comparing. I mean, I'm gonna have both sides. Like, I'm gonna have people like Israel hate on me for
yeah. Hassan, put it like this.
Probably be a
Okay. So let me tell you something, bro. Tens of thousands of civilian. Let's just take this back. All right. Tens of thousands of civilians killed, 80% kill rate. Right. You can't do that by accident. Let's say. Right?
You can't.
So you presented a casualty percentage, but it has no source attribution. We both know that. I understand. I understand you talk to these American influencers who just like read a couple tweets,
No, so I'm using the Israeli data.
Hold on.
Hassan, if I were to
Hassan, hold on a second, bro. Hold on a second. Because I get it, bro. I get it.
Right.
Like, because when you're looking at the American influencers, right? Like, they're like, they study and then they make a video, but it's like then they avoid they avoid people like you because you actually know what you have a depth of understanding of what you're talking about, and it works. To your credit, it works. But I just want you to understand. I'm also a Middle Eastern, bro. I'm from the same neighborhood, so to speak. You know what I'm saying, brother? So I want to push back on something here, and that's so let's go back to this. Is that you presented this casualty percentage with no source attribution. The civilian casualty estimates in Gaza vary drastically between the Gaza Health Ministry, which is literally terrorist Hamas run, the UN report, which is basically communist nations, basically CCP packed with that. They got Hamas members in there, and independent intelligence assessments, and you got IDF transparency releases. So the bottom line, there's literally no credible independent intelligence source that has verified 80% civilian kill rate. The battlefield casualty ratios, okay, in dense urban warfare, they're higher, man. Hassan, they're much higher. But if you don't distinguish combatant versus non-combatant, an 80% claim is that's not even analytically valid. It's just not analytically valid. So this is my last point. This non-sourced statistic, like that you're putting out as a certainty. No, man. No, it's
look. I don't want people to think. Listen. I don't want people to take my word for it.
By the way, there's no documented, verifiable mass protest in Israel supporting rape that exists, bro. Like, come on, man. Like you think 10,000 Israelis come and they say, let's all go and support rape? Come on,
bro. So listen, I don't want to take my word for it. What I would encourage the viewers to do their own research. Do your own research and research the civilian death rate in Gaza and look at Israel's position, look at the Palestinian position. But I'm telling you, from whatever angle, whatever source you look at, it's going to be utterly.
Bro, you're from Syria. Hassan, you're from Syria, bro. Assad used chemical weapons, bro. He performed systematic mass torture. How could you compare that to the IDF, which has all this extensive oversight. They literally face international scrutiny if they even go to the bathroom for longer than whatever. Like there's so much international scrutiny on the IDF. The Syrian army under Assad was literally using chemical weapons. Literally chemical. They engaged in deliberate civilian massacres, bro. Massacres. You know that. You know better than that, man. You know better. You know better than to say the Assad army is compared to the IDF. Come on, bro. Come on. That's just intellectually.
Listen, no. I mean, look, I don't know. Listen, I wouldn't even resist saying Assad is worse than Netanyahu. I mean, I think they're both scums of the earth. I certainly think Assad has killed more people. I mean, you're talking about a million.
Well, at least you can admit that. At least you can admit that. Yeah, at least you can admit that.
Yeah.
At least you can admit that. More people. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. Again, I think Assad is scum of the earth. I wouldn't even be opposed to those who would say he's worse than Netanyahu. But I don't see Netanyahu in good light. Let's be clear. I think he is just inhumane in how he approaches things, and unfortunately, I think he has too much support from within Israel. But again, I think people can just do their own research, look up the images of Gaza, look up the different, the UN numbers, the Israeli official numbers, the Palestinian numbers. Whichever way you look at it, there's an insane.
Hey, bro, I don't see you anymore. Yeah, I don't see you for some reason.
Can you see me or am I gone?
Yeah, it's black.
Let me refresh it. I'm going to refresh this.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just want to say I'm not talking behind his back. I respect Hassan. Good dude. Politics aside, we clearly aren't aligned. I just want everyone to know that this notion that Israel, oh, here we go. Hassan, you back? Okay, I see you.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I see you, brother. But one more thing I want you to know, because you are a Middle Eastern man. You are a Middle Eastern man. So one more notion I'd like to push back on is that this thought, bro, that Israel is this minority group controlling a majority, but just like Assad was controlling the Sunnis. Like, bro, I'm not some idiot that doesn't know the Middle East, man. I've been there so much. My family's from the Middle East. That's so demographically incorrect. It's so demographically incorrect, bro. Israel's Jewish population is the majority within the state of Israel. The Palestinians in Gaza, they're not under Israeli military governance. They're just not. Gaza's governed by Hamas. Hamas, the terrorists that beat and torture their own Palestinians. They literally beat and torture their own Palestinians, their own people. Hamas tortures their own people. Would you say that's accurate?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I've lost you again. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, you can come back if you want. Hassan. All right, guys. I think we've lost Hassan. Hassan, just come back, man. Let me see here. You can just come back whenever you're ready, man. All right, guys. So I think Hassan and I are having a nice little conversation here, yeah, I think there was some good pushback back and forth about our views. I think we were both pretty respectful to each other. Okay, he's coming back. Hey, brother, you see me?
Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Looking good, man.
I can't hear you.
Camp? Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but you can't hear me at all? Maybe you have it on mute. Yo. Yeah, so just to take this back for the people that just joined, a Telegram channel is not intelligence. Okay. I know some of you think it's cute that you're in this like Telegram channel and you think like somehow like the intelligence agencies are some idiots that they go in there like idiots and they just say things and then you somehow found a Telegram channel. No, that's not how it works. It does not work like this at all. That's the bottom line. That's probably the truest shit I told you in this thing. So if analysts were actually using Telegram screenshot, oh, I think he's back. Hey, bro, can you hear me?
Nima, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Hello?
Yep. Yeah, I can hear you. So I just want to say that
I
a
don't know if
Telegram.
you can hear me, but we might have to do a part.
Yeah. Dang, that sucks, man.
I don't know if you can hear me, but if can you hear me? Nod your head if you can hear me. Okay, so you can hear me. Unfortunately, I can't hear you. The other wild thing, my home Wi-Fi just completely shut down, so I can't be on my computer, and I'm on my iPhone. Look, it says no internet for some reason. So we've lost the home Wi-Fi, and I'm not able to hear you on the phone for some reason. I don't know, maybe someone doesn't like the conversation we're having, but we may have to find a way to have a part two. I think we need a part two. It was just getting interesting.
Yeah, you know what? But so you can't see anything, right? You can't even hear me.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't. For some reason, I can't hear you at all.
Okay, you know what? Yeah, I don't know what we're gonna do, man. Dang, that sucks. Oh, you know what? You know what? I'm gonna post something here. Can you see this?
So, Nima, if you can hear me, I guess I could see this. Yeah, I could see your message. But
You
I
can see
really
it.
don't know what's going on with this, unfortunately. And it's very disappointing because I feel like the conversation was being raw and good. So if you're ever down to do a part two, I would love to. I think um, trying to see. Just asked my wife to reset the home Wi-Fi to see if the laptop works. But anyways, I definitely appreciate having me on. Look, when it comes to the kill rate, of Israel, I think people just got to do their own research. Like, don't take my word for it. Don't take your word for it. I think people need to independently look at what's been happening. And again, I can't hear you, so I feel like this isn't really fair to you. But I just wanted to share, like, dude, one of my closest friends we started a charity that we did some work in Africa together. I mean, Israel bombed his family's home, and he lost like 70 members of his family. He lost 70 members in one bombing by Israel. So again, it's just hard for me having friends on the ground to really. Yeah, okay, I'll look at this question, but let me just finish that up. Yeah, just let people research on the Israeli kill rates. How is it that the Muslim Brotherhood and its proxies were designated as terrorist organizations in Egypt, the movement's birthplace? The Muslim proxies are not considered. Well, in FUL, what's FUL? All fully terrorist organs in the United States. So here's the deal. You got the UAE, I think Saudi Arabia, I think Egypt, all of these countries have banned the Muslim Brotherhood. The reason they banned the Muslim Brotherhood over there is because they see them as a threat to their power, right? Because the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and other parts of the Middle East were like the main resistance to the dictatorships there, and their beef wasn't really with anything internationally. Their beef was with their own domestic leadership. Again, so I'm not. Again, I've never been a member of that organization. I didn't even know much about that organization until several years ago, and started hearing a lot about it in the West. But ultimately, I think they are banned in Egypt and other places because they're a form of political resistance to those in power.
Okay. Yeah, man. I think we wrap it up, man. I mean, if I can't talk to you, man, I'm say nice to have you. I'm gonna say nice to have you. And
And just remember, I still can't hear you. So I guess if you got anything else, shoot it over there. Otherwise, like I said, we may have to plan a part two.
1 second here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anima. And I'm really sorry. I swear to God, you know me, I'm a man of faith. This was like, I'm so frustrated. It's completely out of control. My home power went out, and then my cell phone started working, but it doesn't have audio for some reason. I can't hear it. I played around the settings. I tested it didn't work. But I am for the conversation. So you ever want to have me back, you want to continue it, we'll continue right where we left off. But ultimately, I think let's end on where we do agree. Let's just agree to keep
Yeah.
America free and American tax dollars at home. I think that's something that we got to explore. And I'm down to continue the conversation about Israel, Assad, Syria, civil rights, Muslim Brotherhood, all that. But thank you for having me on. I appreciate you. Sorry, sort of ended with these technical difficulties. But again, you can count me back whenever you like.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. It was nice to have you, man. We could definitely do another collab. Nice to have you. Let's keep talking. Much respect for you, man. Even if, you know, it says
thank you. Much respect. Peace. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's politics, man. It's not, you know, it's, you know, appreciate you, man. So good night, bro. All right, guys. For those, you know, I'm going to go for just a few more minutes. I want to let you guys look at a clip that's pretty interesting. And then we call it a day. So this is actually from, I wanted to actually have him look at it too, but since he's not here anymore, I guess we can look at it. Here we go.
Days to come, because they will not be easy. There are people among us today who might not be with us next year at this conference. I caution you of the days to come, because they will not be easy. There are people among us today who might not be with us next year at this conference. And this is the reality, because the liberation struggle requires sacrifice, and I know everyone here is prepared to make that sacrifice.
In May 2024, over 100 organizations gathered for the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit, Michigan. More than 3,000 activists were in attendance. Speakers celebrated the October 7th massacre, called for resistance against the West, and mapped out a vision for the destruction of America from within.
The Palestinians who came to the United States understood their role immediately upon arrival.
We, the movement for Palestine in North America and across the world, are here to fight until victory.
This violent movement has been growing for decades. It's made up of groups including Within Our Lifetime, Students for Justice in Palestine, the Palestinian Youth Movement, and many others. After the October 7th attacks, anti-Israel groups in America were emboldened. They saw the massacre as an opportunity to intensify hostility toward Jews and America.
When I think about the USF, it should burn! Death to America!
As the movement worked nonstop to legitimize the Hamas attack, the activists openly flaunted their hatred of Jews and Israel through protests, vandalism, encampments, and violent assaults, both in the streets and on college campuses. Flags of terror organizations became commonplace in public spaces.
We are Hamas! Yes, we're all Hamas!
Activists celebrated the brutality of the October 7th massacre, drawing inspiration from the barbaric acts of terrorism.
It was exhilarating! It was energetic!
Glory to our martyrs, our heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice.
I salute Hamas. A job well done.
On October 7th, Hamas declared war on Israel. On October 8th, their supporters declared war on America.
It is time to bring the war home! It is time to smash this empire!
The goal of the movement is not just to destroy Israel. Their primary target is the U.S. They call America the enemy, the beast, or simply empire.
We're in the belly of the beast. We're in the heart of U.S. empire.
we are here in the belly of the insatiable imperial beast.
Here in North America, in the U.S., the belly of the beast, the heart of empire.
We have to bring down this empire with 1 million cuts.
We will be hitting empire where it hurts most. Bring empire to its knees.
Dismantling the heart of empire is not easy, and it won't be rapid. But we know it's possible.
This panel, y'all, is talking about what is.
Okay, guys. So I want to just sort of go down. So this was the People's Conference of Palestine. I know this went back a while back, but I want to just sort of, for people who aren't that familiar with what this is like basically a terrorist, a bunch of terrorists and stuff like that. I'm not saying all of them, but a bunch of them. So this ideology, that they're describing, it's not pro-Palestinian activism. Okay, it's just not. It's a revolutionary. They're pushing revolutionary anti-Western stuff. So when you think about it, when they're saying stuff like you just heard, right? The empire will fall. Bring the war home. We are Hamas. Don't look at that as civil rights activism. Just don't look at it like that. Okay. They are expressing a very clear revolutionary intent that is aligned directly with an armed foreign terrorist organization. Just understand that with clarity. So they're taking this like issue activism to this ideological extremism. Okay. So the rhetoric that they're using, if you fact check me, you can do your homework here. You can fact check everything I'm saying. You can look it up. It's interesting stuff. If you look at the Hamas propaganda doctrine, if you look at the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, okay, they're basically promoting what? What's the one thing they're promoting? They're promoting the destruction of Western influence from within. Completely. They think you're idiots. They think you don't know what's going on, right? That's what they think. So when they're saying bring the war home, that's this extremist, attitude that if you look at history, you can all fact check me. Look at a company, look at a movement called Weather Underground. Look at, FARC, those aligned student groups. Look at ISIS, returnee, recruiters. Get into this.
Next, to strike at the heart of empire.
The Palestinian American pro-terror movement uses the word resistance as a euphemism for violence. And that resistance is to be accomplished by any means necessary.
You will resist by any all means necessary.
Yeah, so right. Also, when they're saying stuff like we are Hamas, okay, just think about it like this. Under U.S. law, there's a fact that Hamas is designated as a foreign terrorist organization. That's just a fact. So publicly identifying with a FTO, you literally just crossed from a First Amendment, right, which is protected, right, into an area that raises a big flag, because that's foreign influence, that's recruitment pathways, and that's like this extremist pipeline. Okay. So another thing, when they're talking about the American empire as the enemy, that's another way that they're doing this extremist stuff. And that's the stuff you would find in a terrorist Al-Qaeda, like a manual, like a booklet, or ISIS propaganda. Okay. So I just want to emphasize this. All right. So we'll go back in.
The resistance in all its forms.
Resistance, including armed resistance.
Normalized armed struggle.
They are not terrorists. They are freedom fighters. Our noble, steadfast resistance.
Conference speakers outlined their strategy for bringing the war home.
I believe our fundamental role is to generate political and social crisis within the American ruling class. Mass mobilizations is the primary tactic. Street shutdowns, bridge and train shutdowns, airport caravans and shutdowns, encampments,
building takeovers, targeting of weapons manufacturers, shutting down events.
We will be here in the streets, on our campuses, in our classrooms, in our workplaces every day.
Yeah. So when they're talking about armed resistance, like it's noble, okay, they're basically making this look so like leftist and woke, maybe, but this is textbook militant reframing, literally. Every armed group from the PFLP to Hezbollah to ISIS, they basically just remove the terrorist label and you add in this moral legitimacy. Okay. It's like ideological sanitation. Okay. Look, you know, they sanitize it. Okay. So just understand that, you know, what's going on here.
We have made the situation untenable for the empire's ruling classes and the political.
Yeah, so they're gonna this lady. It's like what you know. She could tell you, oh, they're not terrorists; they're freedom fighters. They're not terrorists; they're freedom fighters. You notice the propaganda? They're removing the stigma. They're replacing it with this heroism, right? And what are they trying to do? They're trying to recruit our people in the United States that are sympathizers. And what else are they trying to do? They're trying to justify escalation. Who does this? Al-Qaeda, ISIS, FARC. You know, there's not like I'm not the only one. You know, this is not the only organization that talks like this. Okay, guys?
They have created a disruptive movement made up of students and faculty, turning young minds into anti-American extremists.
Our movement has helped transform students into revolutionaries.
Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and other factions that fight American hegemony in the region. People who are 18 and 19 years old on campuses truly understand these ideas now.
Protesters target cultural and historical landmarks, seeking to destabilize the foundations of American society. They are openly hostile to law enforcement.
Yeah, and also another thing, guys, some of the Palestinian cause, you know, it's like taken over by these Western woke leftists who just want to collapse America. It's not even about helping Palestinians at this point.
And engage in violent opposition toward the police. The influence of these organizations isn't limited to universities and public spaces. They've even reached the halls of Congress.
Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
We're gonna move Congress and we're gonna move the White House. We're not going anywhere. Free Palestine!
The influence of these violent groups is growing, and they are working towards their goal of dismantling America.
Our struggle is a long struggle, and one that stands on the shoulders of thousands of martyrs and thousands of fighters who have committed and who are committing their lives to lay the ground for the revolution we see ahead of us today.
Listen tells us to escalate for it. That can mean so many different things, but what I will tell you is we need to start sacrificing.
The threat of violence is not theoretical. In this war of resistance, all Americans are potential targets.
Genocide!
These organizations are determined to achieve their revolution, whatever the cost, by any means necessary.
Resistance, by any means necessary.
If the enemy refuses to die, it must be killed.
There is only one solution!
The Palestinian diaspora in North America has committed its martyrs for this cause.
Students have brought the war home.
It is either victory or death.
Either victory or death.
They're losing their ability to control us. And this means that now the gloves are off. And quite frankly, anything is possible.
Yeah, guys. So that was just this conference, just so you guys know what that was. And the People's Conference for Palestine, you guys can all look it up. And just to finish this off, this stream was a pretty good stream. Glad we got a chance to talk. And I just want you guys to know that when they say, one last thing I'd like for everyone to know is that when you look at this and they talk about there's only one solution, that's basically how extremists talk. That's literally how extremists talk. It's saying there's absolute ideology. They will not negotiate. There's no political compromise. And they have this worldview that's zero sum, right? And the gangs that use that, absolute language like this, historically, if you look at the history, they escalate toward violence because they eliminate, right? They eliminate any non-violent off-ramp. Okay? So just be careful for that, look out for that. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate you all. About to log off. Please, if you like this stream, like it, share it, and I appreciate you all. Thank you very much. And by the way, I'm going to start doing more streams as I'm about to do a podcast deal, which is pretty big for me, at least. So I'm going to start doing this about 3 days a week. All right. So thank you very much. Appreciate you all. And hope you have a nice evening. Thank you.